So Chapter 5 is on selecting and testing support materials. So first it talks about what are the different types of support. So you got facts, definitions, 4 different kinds of testimony, examples, and statistics. All of these different things will be ways that you will support your thesis, support your main points, or even support your subpoints. So you want to make sure that you have facts, definitions, testimony, examples, and statistics that will aid in your speech, that are accurate, from credible sources, and that all help support your central idea. So how to determine what types of sources and support to use? There are 4 things you should consider. The first thing to consider is your own personal knowledge. The more information you are able to pull out of your own brain and not depend on another source, the stronger your own personal speaking credibility will be. If you are too dependent on other sources for your information, you lose credibility for your own right to be giving this speech. So you want to pick a topic that you know quite a bit about and that you just need a little bit of support from outside sources. The second thing you need to consider is whether your information is coming from a primary source or a secondary source. While secondary sources are not bad, primary sources are stronger because that means it's coming directly from that person, directly from that study, directly from the original place that information was attained. If you do secondary sources, it's almost like a friend of a friend. So it's information that they heard from somebody else. And while that isn't wrong or bad necessarily, it's not as credible as a primary source. So anytime you can use the original sources, I highly recommend you doing so. Next is to consider whether it's from a scholarly source or a popular source. Popular sources, again, aren't necessarily bad, but they have less credibility because when a source is posting information just for popularity's sake, then there's nothing to guarantee that that information is accurate, and so therefore it makes it less credible. Versus a scholarly source. So anytime you can get an academic journal or information from a nonfiction or textbook, that information is going to be more credible because it's not somebody who is posting results looking for money or looking for people to like them. Instead, they are posting information that is findings based on what they found. And then lastly, you want to make sure you are considering your topic's needs. So if you're giving an informative speech, you got to make sure that the information you are finding, the support you are finding, is not persuasive, trying to get the audience to do one thing or another. Instead, when you're giving an informative speech, your citations need to be information that is just giving the audience more information, more ideas and details about your topic. Versus if you're giving a persuasive speech, you want your support to be things that are supporting your thesis about a change that needs to be made. So make sure that you are considering your topic's needs as well when you are finding your sources. Next, you got to make sure that you are evaluating your support materials. So you want to make sure for accuracy. So again, that goes back to what site or what original source did this information come from, and what do they have to back it up. So if I just say 83% of statistics are made up, and that is something that I publish on a blog, that's not necessarily accurate. But if I was to say I conducted a research where I looked at 10,000 pieces of information, and of those 10,000 pieces, over 8,000 of those pieces of information did not come from an actual study, and that information is actually false, now all of a sudden I have a little more accuracy. The second thing you want to consider for your support materials is the currency of it. So how current is this information? So if things change over time, things drastically change over time. Information about child rearing in the 70s versus child rearing nowadays in 2015 are drastically different. So if the information you're finding is 20, 30, 40 years old, it's going to be a lot less credible than information that was published last month or last year. People always ask for the rule of thumb considering how current information should be. The recommendation I have is if it's a published work, if it's a book that is published, usually 5 years is good. If you're looking at internet sources or scholarly journals, usually the max you want to go back is 2 years. So I highly recommend that your supporting material is all things that have been published since 2012 or 2013 through now. The more current the information is, the more credible it is. Then the last 3 things kind of are along those same lines. So completeness. You want to make sure that if you're using a study or a research or those kinds of things, that the study was completed and that the results were based off of a complete study. If you're getting information from a source, you want to make sure that this is a source that has it completely from beginning through till the end of whatever information you're getting, versus information that has loopholes or skipping steps. Trustworthiness, just like my last lecture, you want to make sure it's coming from as unbiased of a source as possible. And then lastly, suitability. You want to make sure that if this information is suitable, appropriate, and applicable to your speech and to your central idea. So using support materials effectively. When you're using quotations and paraphrasing, you want to make sure that you are giving credit to the person that originally came up with the quote, or if you're paraphrasing a published work but putting it in your own words, you still need to give credit to the original source, because this isn't things that are coming out of your own brain. This is information you found from an outside source. So make sure that you are doing it properly and accurately, and that you are using this information in different ways, and that you are using this information to add to your speech. So I have seen people in the past use quotations or paraphrasing for their entire speech. So it has almost none of their own information and is almost entirely, their speech is almost entirely based off of things that they got from other sources, the other places that they've paraphrased information from. You also want to make sure that you're not just having a quotation or a citation because it's required. You want to make sure that the quotation or the paraphrase is something that is adding, is supporting your speech and your central idea. Whenever you do a quotation or a paraphrase from another source, you have to do an oral citation. I will post in this tab the recommended ideas for MLA works cited page and for oral citations within your speech. I break it down if you do a book, if you do a journal, or if you do an online source. All of the information you have to state in your speech. So if a perfect example I have of that is if I am going to do a speech on our textbook and I want to talk about how to cite sources orally, I would say on page 120 of the textbook DK Guide to Published Speaking by Lisa Ford Brown, she states that citations are the oral and written credits for the original sources of the support materials you are using. This book was published, the second edition of this book was published in 2014 by Pierce Education Incorporated. That would be one verbal citation in my speech. Then on the last page of my outline, I would also have a works cited page. So on that note, I will let you do MLA, APA, Chicago. If you have a fourth way that you usually use for citing your works cited page, please let me know what it is so I can check it for accuracy. Please make sure you are doing the work needed to have a proper works cited page. My big tip for that is if you're willing to do MLA, I have a document posted that literally breaks down the main types of citations you use and how to cite them properly with hanging indents and what needs to be italicized and where commas go and semicolons go and periods go. So you can look at the example of one of my citations and copy that with your own information, and it will be accurate and you will get full credit for your works cited page. So now that I have completed Chapter 5 lecture, you are now more than welcome and encouraged to take the Tab 2 quiz. Our next bit of information will be covering things on Chapter 5, which is listening and evaluating. So keep an eye out for that lecture. It will be posted shortly.